Throughout Europe, towering stone monuments rise from the ground like legendary giants. Today they stand silent, relics of a bygone age. But for nearly 5 centuries, they were a source and symbol of ultimate power. During an era of great turmoil, the medieval castles served as the primary tactical weapon in battles that were politically motivated or religiously inspired. Savagely attacked and defended, they evolved to become among the most impressive military structures ever built and helped transform the landscape. They also contained secrets in design that in war could make the difference between life and death, success and failure, victory and defeat. Northern France, 1066. It's early autumn, and Normandy has just been united under the rule of Duke William. Ever ambitious, he sets his sights on the throne of England and orders the construction of 350 ships. He waits for a favorable wind, one that will carry his army across the English Channel and propel him onto the pages of history. Finally, on the evening of September the 26th, Duke William's flotilla of longships embarks upon the 70-mile journey across the open water to the south coast of England. On board are 2,000 men-at-arms, 3,000 horses, and over 7,000 knights. But they also bring with them secret cargo that will become the decisive military weapon of its age. It's not a lethal new sword or axe, nor a new breed of warhorse. Carefully stowed aboard William's ships are the basic building blocks of a castle. Upon arriving, the Normans worked quickly, building a simple castle made up of a high earth mound surrounded by a wooden fence. By the time the English army has marched south to meet them, Duke William's men have remarkably built 2 other castles. The English want to avoid attacking these Norman strongholds. They choose instead to face the enemy in open combat on a hill near the village of Hastings. The 2 armies meet in a furious clash. Norman cavalry bears down on the Saxon warriors who are armed with great axes, which can cleave a man and his horse in 2. The carnage is horrendous. The ranks so tightly packed together that there isn't even space for the dead to fall. The battle rages until dusk, and finally the English King Harold is killed. The Normans emerge victorious. The Battle of Hastings earns William the British crown, and the name by which he's remembered to this day, William the Conqueror. While the makeshift wooden castles play no direct role in this first battle, they form a vital part of William's overall strategy for the eventual conquest of Britain. Unlike anyone before him, he'll use castles in a revolutionary way. The conquered Anglo-Saxons resent their new Norman ruler. William knows that to restore any semblance of peace in his kingdom, he'll need to impose order swiftly. Castles become the means by which he forces his will on a disgruntled people, making his power and presence felt and seen throughout the land. After Hastings, William's armies drive north, subduing the countryside and erecting hundreds of his trademark castles: Canterbury, Rochester, London, Windsor. In 2 years, these castles marked the Norman path to conquest. Norman castles are built in what's called the Motte and Bailey style. Their secret lies in a deceptively simple design. They're formed by placing a tower on top of a man-made hill and surrounding it with a ditch and an enclosing wall made of either wood or stone. Once erected, it takes only a small group of soldiers to defend it successfully. Yet castle building is very labor-intensive. William finds the necessary manpower only after threatening the local peasants with force. In the process, he brings a new social structure to Britain. It is known as feudalism. The system binds peasants to regional lords to the king, and at the heart of it all lies the castle. Soon, an orgy of castle building begins. In the next 2 centuries, nearly 900 stone castles appear throughout the countryside, changing the British landscape forever. The secret of their success lies in their adaptability. A castle that evolves to meet changing threats, whether from political instability or improved military technology, will remain vital. Those that fail to adapt will soon prove obsolete. One prime example of a fortress which evolved successfully is Warwick Castle, situated in the very heart of England. William wouldn't recognize it today, but despite 7 centuries of alterations and improvements, the basic architectural design is still evident. In 1068, Conqueror built a familiar Motte and Bailey castle on this site. But since the wooden structure was susceptible to fire, in the early 13th century, the defenses were rebuilt in stone. Beginning in 1268, a gatehouse, drawbridge, and flanking towers were added to protect the main point of access. By the end of the 14th century, nearly 350 years after William began construction, Warwick boasted thicker, higher, and stronger walls. But strip away the alterations, and you'll see William's original castle design. Warwick stands as a model of medieval military architecture, beginning with its towers where lookouts can spot approaching armies miles in the distance. Elsewhere, archers pick off attackers from gaps along the crenellated wall, while narrow slits provide snipers with even more protection. Since there's little chance the enemy can mount a surprise attack on Warwick, the only way inside is through the main gatehouse. But among the many obstacles blocking the path is a steep incline that makes any assault an uphill struggle. Truth is, overwhelming Warwick's defenses head-on is nearly impossible. Attackers would often meet their foes at the foot of the wall, and there the fighting would begin. Sometimes, while the battle rages elsewhere, soldiers try more ingenious ways of getting inside. These stout-hearted souls would attempt to penetrate the castle's defense through its only unguarded opening. It would mean a daring climb up the foul-smelling latrine chute. Spies worked under a constant threat of discovery, and if caught, there were several means of dealing with them. Castle punishments were designed to instill fear in the surrounding population as well as the enemy. The point is to control the land and people around the castle for more than the range of a crossbow. The real secret lies in governing as much through fear as through force. And there's good reason to fear such a fortress.
Loose! Loose! That's enough!
But feared more than execution is the dungeon at Warwick Castle, the final destination for many prisoners. The dank, vaulted chamber holds a grisly assortment of torture instruments, including a rack for stretching and tearing victims until their limbs break, and a gruesome spiked chair used to extract damning confessions. Horrific as these tortures are, there's always the chance of survival and the hope of release. The same can't be said of this innocent-looking portal, which opens on the most infamous and feared of punishments. Once inside here, all hope is gone. Within this small, dank chamber, the prisoner is abandoned, left to wait alone, slowly but inevitably starving to death. These holding cells were known as oubliettes, which translated from Norman French literally means a place to be forgotten. Despite their growing might, the Normans find controlling the fringes of their British territory an ongoing struggle. Marauding bands of warriors make lightning-fast raids from defensive structures of a different sort. The most common is known as a ring fort. Largely communal, a ring fort consists of little more than a wooden fence on a stone foundation. Inside are workshops, living quarters, granaries, nurseries, and enclosures for domestic animals. Despite appearances, the Irish ring fort known as Caher Ballykinarga dispels the notion that inhabitants were rustic, peace-loving farmers. They were constantly under threat from both rival warring clans and invading tribes like the Viking raiders. Survival called for resourcefulness, even in the face of greater numbers or superior weaponry. Today, the fortifications of the ring fort look like no more than a crumbling wall of stones. But it formed a formidable barrier, and what surrounded them was a truly ingenious secret. A field of razor-sharp stones hidden almost entirely in tall grass. These stones shred the feet and shins of the onrushing enemy. They also make attack by horse or chariot impossible, and render any battle tactics or unit formations useless. Despite their simplicity, ring forts are more than a match for any aggressor of their time. But by the 1100s, a new era is dawning, one that makes these strongholds a thing of the past. This era brings new battle tactics and new social developments, and at the center of this revolution stands the castle. Less than a century after the Battle of Hastings, the Normans are at the height of their power, boasting the largest army in Europe since the fall of the Roman Empire. Now new lands beckon on the horizon. And in 1154, King Henry II, great-grandson of William the Conqueror, unleashes the Norman storm on Ireland. Like his forefather, Henry's secret weapon in this strategy of conquest is the castle. Far from the ring forts familiar to Ireland, these are imposing stone structures centered around a towering keep, the stronghold of the castle itself. The Anglo-Norman lords construct many fortifications of this type in an effort to subdue the Irish, but none are so impressive as the fortress in Munster province known as Bunratty Castle. Thomas de Clare, an English nobleman, builds the first stone castle here in 1270. King Henry III had granted de Clare permission to build the castle while urging him to take all the lands he could conquer in Munster. De Clare does just that. Once the stronghold is completed, he begins preying on local Irish clans, turning Bunratty into a tool of conquest for himself and his king. De Clare believes in ruling as much through fear as through force, deceit being a tool in his strategic arsenal. But his methods weren't always foolproof. In 1277, the local Irish leader, Brian Ruadh, seeks De Clare's help in claiming the kingship of a local realm called Thomond. De Clare hosts a banquet in Ruadh's honor. It's an evening of drinks and toasts all around. Little does the guest know he's attending a macabre Last Supper. In mid-meal, De Clare has Ruadh removed from the hall and taken outside. Once tied up, Ruadh is drawn and quartered, his body literally pulled apart. De Clare later orders Ruadh's remains hung outside the castle as a warning to other troublesome locals. But the tactic backfires. Instead of intimidating the Irish, it spurs them into action. Soon all of the regional clans join forces and plan a combined assault on Bunratty. United, they'll make De Clare pay for his barbaric treachery. De Clare is confident that Bunratty will withstand any assault. After all, the castle contains features, both obvious and secret, designed to give him the advantage. As the attacking Irish make their way across the open fields towards the castle, they'll be in view of the archers who stand in protected positions on the crenellated roof. The attackers that make it across the killing field to the main entrance are then doused with boiling water and quicklime, poured from an opening above, called the murder hole. Even if they break through the entrance to get to the keep, attackers face narrow corridors and winding staircases which spiral up clockwise, giving added sword room to the defenders. The top of the towers are tiny staircases through which only women and children can reach the attic hideout. A pursuing knight would then find himself trapped and have to retreat. The effectiveness of Bunratty's well-conceived defenses repelled attacks for more than 40 years. But generations of defiant Irishmen refused to bow to the castle. Their secret weapon was time. If they couldn't overtake the castle by force, they would starve it into submission. The Irish mount a blockade around the fortress, which lasts months, and prevents castle residents and the surrounding town from getting food and burying their dead. Soon, an epidemic rages, and Bunratty's inhabitants are decimated. Though its defenses are never physically breached, disease and starvation eventually bring mighty Bunratty to its knees. Men like Thomas de Clare learn that it takes more to defend a castle than moats and high stone walls. It's a lesson other commanders would have to learn the hard way. Examples like Bunratty Castle are useful to castle commanders practicing the art of siege warfare. In particular, it shows that provisions are as important as soldiers, weapons, or defensive architecture. The secret to surviving a siege is thorough preparation. Food and building materials must be collected from the surrounding countryside and stockpiled. Likewise, the castle's storerooms and cellars must be filled with weapons, arrows, crossbow bolts, and lances. But equally important are beans and grain, dried meats, poultry, and salted fish, and of course, wine. barrels of it. While stockpiling food and weapons within the castle is critical, so too is denying food or shelter to an invading army. The shrewd castle commander sends troops out into nearby regions to destroy all crops, livestock, and storehouses. Anything which might aid the enemy. This scorched earth policy devastates the local peasants. Some of whom are then conscripted and trained to help defend the fortress.
No, once more, fight and watch the feet.
In some ways, a siege seems no more than two armies facing each other on opposite sides of a wall. But very often the outcome is determined by how well equipped and prepared the combatants are before the battle begins. Provided a castle is well provisioned, a relatively small force can defend it. In 1294, for example, 37 soldiers successfully held Harlech Castle in North Wales for 2 months against an entire army of thousands of men. Southern France, 1209. By this time, it's legendary throughout the medieval world. A castle known as one of Europe's best fighting fortresses, Carcassonne. It stands at the crossroads of two of Europe's most important and ancient trade routes. Romans, Visigoths, Saracens. Invader after invader have clashed on this site, but none would test this castle more than Simon de Montfort, a military commander famed for bringing castles to their knees, a man whose ferocious zeal helped end a religious movement that dared oppose the Catholic Church. Carcassonne is more than just a castle. 10 castles could fit inside it. Nor is it a city. No city boasted 2 miles of ramparts and more than 50 towers. This is a citadel to end citadels, the last relic of an age of giants. In the summer of 1209, de Montfort's army is marching across France on a crusade supported by Pope Innocent III. The purpose is to find and destroy the followers of the Cathar religion, who reject the spiritual authority of Rome. De Montfort's destination is Carcassonne, the castle defended by Raymond Roger Tronqueval, who was given refuge to the Cathar faithful. Along with his own religious convictions, Tronqueval has faith that his mighty fortress can withstand any assault. Carcassonne is the epitome of castle evolution. The secret of its success lies in its concentric ring defensive system. This means that even if attackers overwhelm one of its walls, the inner defensive walls could still stand firm. The entire city is contained within these 3 concentric defensive walls. For additional advantage, each wall is built higher than the next, enabling defenders on all 3 walls to concentrate their fire on the attackers below. What's more, the 50 flanking towers were separated by the distance of an arrow's flight, so each could help defend another. Tronqueval knows the importance of thorough preparation. He begins stockpiling provisions and training local peasants and announces to the faithful, "I offer a town, a roof, bread and my sword to all the persecuted persons who will soon be without a town or roof or refuge." Then he assembles large artillery engines within the defenses to help protect the fortress. Thousands seek safety behind the mighty walls of Carcassonne. There's no doubt that Tronqueval has a sizable force to help defend the castle, But no one knows whether the stockpile of provisions is enough to sustain all the refugees. Upon arriving at Carcassonne, de Montfort surrounds the castle with an army of nearly 200,000 men and demands its surrender. But Trinqueval, trusting in the technology of his mighty fortress, flatly refuses. De Montfort's next move is to dig in for a long siege. His massive army sets up camp beside the Aude River. Then de Montfort dams the river to cut off Carcassonne's water supply. The siege has begun. Although de Montfort only has to wait for the citadel's provisions to run out or its wells to dry up, victory is by no means guaranteed. He has no way of knowing how well supplied Carcassonne is, nor how many soldiers are behind its walls, or if there's a relief force on its way to break the siege. In fact, he has no way of knowing how long the wait will be. Even if he knew, de Montfort might have trouble keeping his army in the field long enough. Much of his force is made up of mercenaries who need to be paid on a daily basis. Add factors like disease, boredom, desertion, and restlessness, and it's clear that if he waits too long, de Montfort risks seeing his army fall apart. As a result, de Montfort plans to launch assaults at several points along the castle perimeter. He hopes that the attacks will force the defenders to reveal their true numbers and even uncover a weakness in the castle itself. But Carcassonne holds many defensive secrets. For instance, this innocent-looking corridor winds its way around the base of the castle. It's actually a death trap which encloses attackers between two well-defended walls, while boulders are rolled down the corridor like bowling balls to crush the enemy. While any opening in a castle's perimeter defense can be a liability, the architects of Carcassonne made the main gatehouse a giant exception. The stone vaults of the Narbonne Gate open skyward, allowing those in the towers above to rain down fire on invaders. Farther on are iron gates, iron doors, and a booby trap, which smashes invaders with a battering ram. The citadel is as well protected as anyone at the time can make it. And it's a good thing, too, because its defensive capabilities will soon be put to the test. Although the knights in his army are eager for battle, de Montfort decides to use his mercenaries for this first assault, known as an escalade. It'll be a difficult task, because at the top of the walls are covered wooden shelters known as hoardings. From here, defenders fire outward and downward on their enemy in relative safety. This makes those scaling the walls on ladders virtual sitting ducks. Hoardings were pioneered at Carcassonne and were so effective that they were later copied at other castles throughout Europe. As the scaling parties cross the moat and race toward the wall, they're easy targets for the bowmen concealed within the hoardings. Wave after wave of scalers surge up the walls under cover of a hail of arrows. Many begin the climb up the ladders. Most never reach their goal. The escalade is a notorious meat grinder. Montfort expects to lose over half his men in the assault, which is why he uses his mercenaries instead of his better-trained knights. After all, each mercenary costs money. Once they're dead, they cost nothing. Yet as his losses mount, de Montfort decides upon a bold new plan. He orders the construction of a belfry, a siege tower more than 50 feet high.
Word from the king. Says we have 10 days to abandon. It's all the time you have.
My lord.
The idea is to push the tower toward the base of the castle wall. Then soldiers within it can lower the drawbridge onto the top of the wall, allowing them to fight on level ground with the defenders. De Montfort's carpenters begin constructing a machine which can be moved forward on wheels and rollers. The tower is then covered with wood and wet leather as protection against fire and arrows from the castle. After several weeks, the tower is completed, and de Montfort's men begin dragging it forward. But the uneven terrain makes moving it difficult and slow going. Trinqueval has an answer to the tower, using catapults to pound the structure with a steady hail of fire. Meanwhile, fierce fighting rages inside it. Ultimately, de Montfort's men are forced to abandon the tower, and Trinqueval claims an initial victory. Giving up on the siege tower, de Montfort turns his efforts to destroying the hoardings and protecting his scaling parties. He orders the construction of an array of siege machines. The one artillery machine quickest to build in the field is known as the Perrier. With muscle power alone, the sling of the Perrier can send a 30-pound stone crashing through the wooden hoardings.
Loose! Loose!
But as effective as the Perrier is, it's only a single tool. De Montfort knows overwhelming the defenses of Carcassonne will take more of his tactical ingenuity, much more firepower.
Chief.
1 month into the siege, de Montfort's assault on Carcassonne is going well, but the Perrier's progress is slow. He steps up his efforts, ordering the construction of a secret weapon, the trebuchet. Invented in the 13th century, the trebuchet works by counterweight rather than straight muscle power. It can therefore handle much larger payloads and deliver them much farther. Even a century later, trebuchets were weapons of choice on the battlefield. England's King Edward I successfully attacked Stirling Castle in 1304 with a huge trebuchet featuring a throwing arm over 60 feet long. These machines can handle more than large stones. In many cases, armies have hurled the rotting corpses of plague victims or the decaying bodies of animals over the castle walls. One English commander even used a trebuchet to unleash 30,000 cartloads of manure into a defiant stronghold. Attacks like these horrified those behind the castle walls, while the bombardment spread terror and disease. Most likely, de Montfort won't have to resort to such gruesome tactics. He decides to rely on heavy stones and fire bombs to continue his assault. After a week of constant bombardment, a stone crashes through the eastern gate. The attackers rush in jubilant, then are quickly cut down by Trinqueval's men inside. The The assault has made some headway, but the castle defenses are just too strong. Still, de Montfort is not disheartened. He's got a surprise in store for Carcassonne. For 8 weeks, he's had his teams of men working on a secret plan to use one of the most feared tactics in the besiegers' arsenal, a mine. Castle defenders are on alert. They post a sentinel to watch over a pan of water all day and night. A single ripple on the water's surface would point to men digging beneath the ground. Even so, once they detect the mine, it could already be too late. De Montfort's men have spent several days secretly digging a hole in the castle wall. Once it's large enough, they brace it with strong timbers and fill it with wood and pig carcasses. Then they set it on fire. The intense heat will cause the carcasses to swell and explode, with the animal grease fueling the inferno. Before the sentinel can sound a warning, the surrounding wall collapses with a thundering crash. But despite their success, de Montfort's men face the wrath of Trinqueval's defenders. Along the walls of the castle, every step is contested, every inch fought for. Sheer force is unable to break the defenses of such a mighty stronghold. But fate has a twist in store for Trinqueval. After nearly 3 months of constant siege, Carcassonne is finally running out of water. Now thirst has joined the siege on de Montfort's side. With the wells dry, Trinqueval waits 12 days for outside help to arrive. Meanwhile, Carcassonne's women and children are suffering from dehydration, hunger, and disease. In a desperate effort, Trinqueval rides down to the enemy camp to negotiate the release of innocent civilians. He stands face to face with de Montfort, but de Montfort's religious faith outweighs his allegiance to the code of chivalry. He orders Trinqueval to be put in chains. Thus, trickery, not strength, forces Carcassonne to surrender. "15 weeks after the siege began, it was over. Carcassonne fell, the Cathar faithful were punished, and the religion destroyed. Confined to a tower, Raymond Roger Trinqueval falls ill and dies just 3 months later. His title and lands pass into the hands of his enemy, the Crusade commander Simon de Montfort. Yet the siege stone at Carcassonne depicts the citadel's revenge on its conqueror. It's reportedly found on the tomb of Simon de Montfort and pictures one of the outworks of the fortified city on the upper right, while below it a team operates a Perrier. The stone reveals how a well-aimed missile launched from a Perrier crushes de Montfort's skull during a battle 9 years after the fall of Carcassonne. According to the history, the catapult that fired the shot was operated by women. At the time, death this way proved an inglorious end for a ruthless commander. Carcassonne itself would suffer its own inglorious end. By the early 1500s, this once mighty citadel, like most medieval castles, had been made obsolete by a new, not-so-secret weapon, the cannon. The decline of the great castles escalated as war after war shattered Europe. The once powerful ramparts and towers were no match for the battles of the New Age. The secrets of their architecture were useless against the powerful, explosive weapons. This is what's left of Kenilworth Castle in England. Like Warwick, 30 miles away, Kenilworth was built by William the Conqueror. However, during the English Civil War, parliamentarians seized the castle. Fearing that the mighty fortress would be used against them, they chose to destroy it. With gunpowder, they blew up the outer wall of the keep. Then they demolished most of the structures within. This was the unfortunate fate of many medieval castles. And of the rest, very few survived without some changes or adulteration. Even without the advent of gunpowder, castles were becoming relics of the past. In the social swirl that follows war, life becomes more domestic. In the castle, courtiers now replace soldiers. In place of war parties, the earls held banquets. Surrounding them at all times were attendants and administrators, hangers-on anxious to press business, marshals, stewards, pages, footboys. The list seems endless. Rich and powerful chose to build new and better homes. Theirs would no longer be castles like those of the Middle Ages. Instead, they preferred grand, sweeping palaces designed for luxury and comfortable living. The age of the castle had passed, and with it, the age of siege warfare. Still, these castles today come under siege, not by armies of weapon-wielding soldiers, but by armies of tourists, anxious to recapture the lost glories of a bygone age. To many of them, these mighty fortresses are more than ancient relics. Instead, they echo vividly with life and imagination. They're reminders of an age when a secret weapon changed the destiny of Europe's kingdoms. A time when covert strategies and hidden agendas were part of building design. An age of glory, an age of chivalry, an age of castles at war.